rise. But the stream looks good. The stream's healthy.
Yeah, and everybody, I can hear you guys clearly, so.
Stream's healthy.
Yeah, and everybody, I can hear you guys.
Yes, I can. That's good to hear. Okay, I'm gonna get started in 3. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, Joe and David. Thanks again for coming by, guys. How you guys doing?
Of course, doing well. How about you, bud?
Dude, I'm stoked that we get to do this because this is just a free-for-all on firearms. I don't always get to have this in a planned setting, but we do today. So I know Joe's on a tight window, so let's get this started. Joe, we're going to be going on the modern day stuff first, so feel free to jump in on what you want to talk about.
Okay. As far as do we hit our questions?
Yeah, so as far as our questions, how about the debates in the social circles about the modern firearms?
That's a modern issue. That feels like a good place to
Yeah,
start.
you know?
Yeah, so amongst my friends, I've had conversations with Aaron about it more than anything, and we kind of tend to agree, if you can have it legally for now, have it, but why do you need it? And on one hand, I tend to agree with him. Take the AR-10, AR-15 platform. Not everybody needs an AR-10 or an AR-15. However,
but if you want one, you should be able to get one.
If you want one, you have one. Now, from my standpoint, I've always wanted to build one, which is probably going to be my next firearm purchase. I'm going to probably build one from hand.
From hand. Okay.
Yeah, from hand. It's what I've always wanted to do. Sort of make it my own, if you will. So I will exercise my Second Amendment right to do that. However, I think Aaron and I are kind of on the agreement that if, banning that platform forever were to be for the greater good for humanity, and you could, sit down and show me proof that banning the AR-10, AR-15 platform is, there's going to be not a single gun death ever, period. I would bite the bullet, so to speak, and say, okay. But I know that's not going to happen, so I would fight for our Second Amendment right to keep it, along with a lot of other semi-automatic weapons, which I know that some people are trying to pass legislation to ban all semi-automatic weapons, which I think is a little bit silly.
Right.
But to each their own. You can show that most homicides tend to come from handguns, as it is anyway. And there's not a lot in, future bills or current bills to ban handguns, aside from the semi-automatic part, but you can have a revolver or something like that. So it's really not going to do as much as people might think to ban those evil weapons, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up about handguns. And it's been that way for a long time. I mean, if you could wind the clock back to the 1880s, it was handguns. Again, it's just people had 4 wheel guns instead of 1 semi-automatic pistol. So it's just pick your poison on that one.
Right.
But then if you get into rifles, then the number goes way down. What was it, 3%, 5%? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think even then it was the AR-15 platform accounts for all but 1% of deaths by firearm or by rifles.
So of that subgroup.
Yeah.
Yeah, and personally, I'm not a big AR-15 guy, just because of how much media has really said that, hey, you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't have this, this is the...
Yeah.
I hate that part of it. But as far as functionality...
Here's the thing. I mean, okay, first and foremost, slippery slope, anything we give up, everything we give up. I'm going to put that all up front now. But if everyone's going to focus on the AR-15, and that's where the legislation is going to be, and that's where the fear-mongering essentially is all going to be focused, then as a scapegoat, it's I think I'm with Joe. I'm a little bit more closer on the principle side, on the freedom, rights, and liberty side of things, where it's no, fuck no, that shouldn't be an issue ever. But, if we can prove to me ultimately it's for the greater good, and from, a pro firearm perspective, it's more of just a scapegoat firearm, and we still get to have firearm culture, then basically it's all fear mongering to an ignorant population anyway. They're not going to know the difference between an AR-15 and anything else. So
yeah, the interesting one that I think that gets skipped over in the AR-15 discussion is the Mini 14. You can arguably do just as much damage with the Mini 14, and Mini 14s will accept the same mags typically. You can buy a tactical stock, throw it on the Mini 14, and it's going to accept Magpul mags, so you can put a 30-round magazine in a Mini 14, shooting 5.56, 2.23, and if you want to do damage with the Mini 14, you could do just as much damage with it as you would an AR-15. But it gets skipped over almost in every single discussion just because it typically looks like a standard rifle. You can make it look otherwise, but bone stock, you could still do the same thing, especially in the hands of somebody that knows what they're doing.
Well said. And there's other calibers for this too that I think people forget about, like the 6.8 millimeter SPC, which is based on a similar AR platform, but guess what? It's just the reason why it doesn't show up is the round's like twice as expensive. And that's another point to it.
Right. If it's not as accessible, it's not as dangerous.
But they're going specifically after the AR-15 5.56 modular design because they really hate the fact that you can change the mag really fast. They really hate that it's
efficiency. If it's too efficient, it's too dangerous because, I mean, in essence, it is a killing machine. So I get, the efficiency element of it, but it's one of those things, like it's a killing machine. It's an all or nothing deal. Like it being efficient or inefficient shouldn't change its legality and scariness necessarily, right?
And I'm with David on like the podcast we had back a couple months ago. If we could have a machine gun, that'd be great. Except in this day and age, there's just so much press around automatic weapons in the civilian arms world that it's better to stay away from just from the sake of the politics. But I agree with, should we be able to have one? I'd say yes, as long as you're responsible. If you're not responsible, don't give it to them. Just like with any other firearm, which is what we've been saying in our community to begin with.
And we do this. I mean, we do the same thing with driver's licenses, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? It's like cars are just 2-ton killing machines, and if people aren't in a state of mind to be able to drive them, they don't give them the license. You know what I mean?
Redacted.
We still do give some pretty silly people.
Well, that's because the government is the one in charge of who gets the licenses, and if you give the government a job like that, of course it's going to be done poorly.
Oh boy.
Man.
So, Joe, now that we've covered some of the debates, tell me about some of your favorite firearms. What are some of your favorite firearms? Can you get like top 3, top 5 around there?
Yeah, so I've always been incredibly fascinated with World War II era firearms. Obviously, the big one for me is the 1911. It's just, I mean, in the name, it's a 1911. So
we're going to get to the list later. That's on my list.
It was built prior to World War II, but it was heavily used in World War II, so which is where it really kind of got its shine and glamour.
Popularized.
Yeah, popularized. And there's just something about it that's so aesthetically pleasing, beautiful, and it's just a design that's standing the test of time. It's the 1911, and to this day, it's one of the most popular and well-built firearms that you can get out there, and it competes with Glock, Beretta, and so on and so forth. And I love it, and I want one, but I don't want to buy a cheap one. If I'm going to buy one, I want to get a nice Kimber or a nice Springfield on it, or
maybe do something like put a pearl handle on it or something like that.
No, it's got the Constitution in the background. It's all grayed out. It just says "We the People" in big.
We the People. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And I love those the 1911. I'm not really one for commemorative firearms. The black steel with the gold millwork with filled letters and all that. But so I've seen a 1911 in that style, and that it's one of those things like you never shoot it. You never shoot it. But oh my God, it looks so beautiful. Oh man.
Here's this fire. Here's this 1911. I paid $2,000 for it. I never fired around through it, but goddamn, does it look good?
I love looking at it every time I open my gun safe, which is right there on top. Just it's like that would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a diehard 1911 fan too. There is something about the feel, the way it fires, the amount of recoil that it has. Not too much, not too little. It's a descendant, technically, of the 45 Long Colt, which, when we get into firearms history, I bet Dave and I will start really riling that up. And that's a
I'll let
long
most of that
history.
for you. I got the old stuff, so you can.
Yeah, wasn't John Browning's like the predecessor just before the 1911 was like the Browning High Power or something like that?
So the Browning High Power came later, and that was the 9mm. But the 1911 had a wide variety of stages, and there's a great YouTube video on Forgotten Weapons that Ian McCollum talks about, and it goes back to like around 1899 all the way to, and then there's about 7 or 8 different versions of the 1911 that eventually gets to 45 ACP. And the 45 ACP came out when they were shooting stock in the Chicago yards, with all the cattle and stuff. They're trying to figure out what wounds does a 1911 or a different calibers do, and a 45 ACP was what they were looking for. No less than 230 grains for the bullet. No less than. They're talking about smokeless powder at this time.
Right.
How efficiently can we do it?
And it's just so American, You take you go to a cattle yard in America and you try different calibers on cattle.
What other countries think Americans do in our spare time, we actually do.
And we have to own up to it. It's like, yeah, that happened.
That was us, yeah.
And they said, 45 ACP is what the Army wants. The 38 ACP is not cutting it. They found out in the 1899 to 1900 war with Indonesia, in the Philippines, that 38 ACP wasn't enough. And they're going, we want more power. Give us the 45 back.
Yeah, and that was a particularly brutal conflict also. And there's something to be said for that. But I hear you. It was definitely motivation to be like, no, what do we do when we have a population that won't give up and we just need to blow giant holes in everyone all the time to stop them in their tracks? It's like, and then the 45 ACP came to be. We're like, okay, that one. That's the one.
That one. Essentially the Long Colt, except 3 times smaller because of smokeless powder.
Right, more efficient. That's really all it is.
And especially when you got the old timers going, look, I'm going back to smokeless. Like, well, we're not going back to smokeless. That's not happening here. And then they see the 1911, they're like, whoa, what is this space magic? And it really has stood the test of time, because even with Glocks nowadays, that they're really the Honda Civic of the firearms industry when it comes to the sidearms.
Highly versatile, and I hear it.
I agree.
But there's something undeniable about a 1911, and I think it goes back to the craftsmanship of it. You can you can feel the craftsmanship. Where a Glock, Glocks, I mean, they don't really break unless you run it over or something because of the polymer frame.
You really have to try.
You have to try.
A firearm is a tool, and you can appreciate a well-crafted tool regardless of what it is. A craftsman can identify quality and say that, yes, this is the one. Like, I've swung that hammer, I've swung this hammer, this is my favorite hammer. It's like, it's going to be the same with firearms, with any tool ever, and it has been for a long time. So
the way I put it to Stover, though, is if you're talking specifically like the Glock and the 1911 debate as is,
Never ends.
And I would show off the 1911 all day. The Glock would just kind of be utility.
The Glock is nice because you can buy one frame and swap out the barrel and have different calibers, and it's like I understand where the draw is to it, but
you can make a Glock look nice, but for the amount of money that you would spend to make it look nice, and arguably it shoots nice bone stock anyway, but you could make it shoot nicer. But for all of that, you could buy a nice 1911 too.
Yeah.
And now I appreciate the disassembly though. The disassembly of a Glock is just okay. Lock the slide. Push the button up. There's 3 parts. That's it. I mean, it takes all of 5 seconds. With a 1911, that is the one time I actually do not like it because it takes forever for me. And for some people, it doesn't take that long, but for me, it takes a while to get everything.
20 years, it won't take you that long.
Well, for me, it takes a while, and I'm going, okay, got to get the spring, and then there's all the little parts. But mind you, they're all stainless, and I thought, oh, this is cool. So each individual part, that goes back to the craftsmanship thing. But Glocks have the Honda Civic, but it won't break usually. And they call it the block though because of the sights. Some people call it that, and I don't mean to rack on Glock because they really have proven their utility. I mean, over the last 30 years, striker fire, less parts, modularity, proven in the military. Those things it's got running for it right now. So as far as utility, I'm glad we've got it. What other favorite firearms do you got, Joe?
So I really, really like the Springfield. What's the M? God, called the M19? I'm probably wrong on that one.
Is it 308?
No, it's 30-06. It was the sniper rifle during World War II for us, basically.
Oh, you're talking about the 1903. Yeah. 1903. Essentially the Mauser copy made by Springfield.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... It's got a special place in my heart just because I watched Saving Private Ryan a lot as a little kid.
Oh, the Catholic sniper. Yes.
Yeah. Man, that guy. But it's also really neat because the 30-06 was a Wildcat round, I believe, was introduced, and it was meant to be a hunting round, and it proved itself as probably one of the most versatile hunting rounds that you could get. So what did we do? We hunted people with it. Basically, we got to that point.
People are medium game. That's true.
Yeah. So and the .06 holds a special place in my heart too because that was the first cartridge that I ever shot as far as like a hunting round goes when I started hunting big game because my grandpa shot a 30-06. My dad shot a 30-06. Now I shoot a 30-06. And it will probably continue to be that way. I'll get my son eventually or daughter in the .06 and let them shoot it. It probably won't be the only thing that they shoot, but it's nice and it works. And
yeah, there's a lineage there. And 30-06, the good news is you can load it so hot in comparison to like a 308. So I think there'll be a utility for it as long as we're in the smokeless era. I think there'll be some kind of utility for it.
Yeah, there are much better rounds now, I would argue. For those purposes, I guess. You got the 308, the 65 Creedmoor, 7mm now, the 300 Win Mag. They can all vastly outshine the .06 in terms of long range shooting. But the .06 still works, and it's classic, and it does what it's meant to do. Another fun fact, though, the one that the other sort of automatic weapon that was used in World War II, the BAR, that was basically an automatic .6, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's like 450 rounds a minute, and there's a new version of it called the H-Car, by Ohio Ordnance, and I can put a link in the description. And that's essentially the modern day version. Vickers Tactical did a YouTube video on it. Holy crap, man. They got like a hydraulic buffer, they cut down a lot of the steel, and they made it modular, kind of like an AR platform. And it fires, if you get the actual automatic weapon version of it, at 450 RPM with 30-06.
That's a lot about six.
It's a lot of six. Yeah. It's crazy. And they asked
you're on
him,
the upside of $1 a shot on that, right?
it makes you wonder. And they asked him, are you going to make it in 308 or something? They're like, nah, we're going to keep it this way. It's, oh, okay. Like $4,500. It's a lot of money.
Yep.
The one that's more expensive, though, is the 300 Win Mag, and I like it, but the Out 6 is still a little bit better.
Gotcha. David, do you have any favorite calibers or any favorite rifles of your own?
Yeah, I didn't want to cut Joe off, but my 30-30 is probably my gun like that. You know, it's a lever action. It's not efficient outside of 200, 300 yards. I'm not even that accurate, tell you the honest to goodness truth, but
except for that one time.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, you know. Well, I mean, we shot how many times? You know, 1 in 50 doesn't really count as accuracy. Right?
Maybe 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
1 in 20, right? But that's how I feel about my 30-30. You know, it's a great caliber. If I'm shooting at anything in that range, that 100 to 300 yard range, like I'm happy to shoot that because I can shoot it all day long. You know, it's like I'm firing an antique firearm that was not designed for comfort, and I can shoot it all day long. So, that's something that I can appreciate it because my other, I guess where my passion lies is in shooting skeet. So, that shotguns and you can load less powder and it doesn't, and lengthen your day on the range that way. But shotguns, by and large, are not something that I can and or want to shoot all day. So,
does Joe feel the same way about shotguns, or do you have something different?
So, when I was first introduced to hunting, I was introduced to hunting upland game bird. So we did a lot of pheasant hunting, a lot of dove, quail, so on and so forth. So I grew up initially shooting shotguns. So it's always been a lot of fun for me. I have a 16 gauge, which is a fairly uncommon gauge now to shoot. Everybody just 20 gauge now or 12 gauge. Those are the two
right.
Or maybe a 10 if you're feeling a little crazy. 16 is kind of almost unheard of now, and it goes to show in the prices. I just bought a box of 20 for $30.
Holy cow!
Whereas I could have bought a box of 12 gauge for $13.
Yeah.
But
buckshot or slug.
Yeah, but my dad got me that 16 gauge before I was born, solely for the intention of giving it to me.
Yeah, so it's a family firearm,
So
and that's that's what my 30-30 is. And that's part of the reason why I've got so much love for it. So.
Yeah, so for that reason, I will always shoot my 16 gauge. I have since been out of practice with my 16 gauge though, so that box of 20 went real fast, and I only hit a few. But I really need to get back into practice in terms of just shooting in general. Last weekend, not last weekend, 2 weekends ago, we went out pig hunting, and we got ourselves a pig and stocked our freezer up. But I missed 2 before I hit my 3rd one. But
funny, we're hearing about that now for the first time.
Going back into some bad habits, instead of keeping my head down, looking at the scope, after I pulled the trigger to see what was going on. This was my first pig that I ever killed. So I was getting a little giddy, a little excited, and thinking about it now in hindsight, what I was doing is I was pulling the trigger and picking my head up real fast, or
That's
And on the last one, I was like, all right, screw it, I'm tired. I just want to get it so I can pull the trigger, and that was it. The last one.
Huh. 16 gauge though, for real. I don't even know when that came out.
Oh, I have no idea. I know it was very popular in, I want to say it was popular in Europe for
Okay.
a good period of the night from near its inception, but I don't remember. Looks like David's looking it up, so I'm very interested to know exactly when it came out. Um, it's very fun, but it's for me it kicks a little bit more than a 20 gauge, kicks less than a 12 gauge, and it doesn't have as much spread as a 12 gauge. It's got a bit more spread than a 20 gauge. So for me, I'm very happy to shoot it and be happy with it. And I can probably shoot it all day long. Mine's so old though it doesn't really have a recoil pad, so
Oh.
I could shoot it all day long, but I would prefer not to.
Did you find anything, Dave? I've never heard of this before.
Truth be told, digging back as far as the London gun trials of 1879, it never surpassed the 12 gauge. 12 gauge superiority. I mean, it mostly just talks about its popularity in the 21st century. Here we go. Peak of 16 gauges in American culture were in the 40s and 50s, when almost a quarter of the shotguns sold were 16 gauge. So,
Oh.
that would.
Yeah, this one is an old 870 Wingmaster, so I don't even know what year it is. I could look up the number and figure it out, but it looks old. The bluing's all worn off on it. There's dings and scratches everywhere, but I love it. It's mine.
Yeah.
Right.
There are many like it, but this one is mine. Right.
So yeah, that's mine. And then I've got my out six. I could probably shoot my out six all day, but it's got a beefy recoil pad on it, and the out six doesn't tend to kick as bad as some people might make it out to, unless you don't have a nice recoil pad. In which case, you are going to feel it. Because my first introduction to shooting an out six was, I was 10, I want to say, and I shot it across the canyon. And it was my grandpa's out six that he got in 1971. So it had a steel plate on it. And that didn't feel good. But
on your 10-year-old shoulder, yeah, I bet not.
Yeah, what? Come on, they had leather. No leather? No, here's a steel plate, son. Oh, okay.
Thanks. Boy. All right, I've got time for about one more question, and then I can get on that here.
Okay, one more question. So, favorite firearm of all time, as far as rifles, you would say is 30-06. So bolt action.
My out six is actually a semi-automatic. However, I do want to get a bolt action rifle. I've always preferred bolt action rifles.
Reliability,
and there's just something about the way they feel when you shoot them.
and that roll it back shotguns, same deal, man. There's nothing more satisfying.
Yeah. We used to shoot. We still shoot coyotes a lot, and using the 22-250. I don't have my old 22-250 anymore. I used Summer's stepdad's last time, but man, there's just something so satisfying about taking that shot, getting the kill, and racking that bolt. It feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pick up that shell casing, keep it.
Yeah. The one that I'm actually actively looking at though is it's a Bergera. It's the B14 Ridge, and it's a bolt action and it shoots the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Okay.
And when I first heard about 6.5 Creedmoor, I knew it was around. It was coming out. It was popularized. Everybody was into it, and I thought, it's probably a good round, but I still like my out six. And then I shot the 6.5 Creedmoor at Summer's parents' house, and I'm sold. I love that round. I think that's going to be gorgeous. Summer just got first rifle 2 days ago.
Oh, congrats.
Oh, good deal.
He got
Well, so she tried to buy it 12 days ago and could only pick it up 2 days ago. Is that right?
well, no. She made
Or she's got 8 days to go.
yeah, she's got 8 days to go. But
California.
but she got it in the 6.5. Actually, we got it at Country Pleasures just right down the street.
Oh, there you go. Yep. Nice local place. Any ammo in there when you stopped in? Shout
I,
out to COVID-19.
I was at work, but she got it in the 6.5 Creedmoor also, and I love my Out 6, but I think I might be coming around to that one. It seems like a perfect all around round. Unless you want to start hunting moose or grizzly.
Bear.
Yeah, big game.
You could take an elk with it. You could take a black bear with it. Deer, and it's not crazy enough that I could take it out and go shoot coyotes with it and have a blast. So the more and more I read about it, the more I'm leaning towards that becoming my favorite round.
I can see why. It shoots pretty flat, but they came up with the 6.5 a long time ago, but it was, in 2008 when they really started using it for sportsman shooting, and then all of a sudden it became this sensation all over the place. A little expensive, but yeah, I could see the appeal.
Well, it was expensive, but now prices are starting to normalize just because there's more of a demand for it. I can go out and I can go out and buy a box that I could use for hunting for like $2 less than the box that I use for Out 6. About $34 versus $36. So price wise, it's not that big of a deal for me.
In comparison to 30-06, though.
In comparison to 30-06.
Okay.
If you want
good to know.
If you want to look at 300 Win Mag or something like that, that's $1 a bullet, typically. Or you have less popular rounds like the 280 or the 243. The 243 is actually might be a little bit cheaper, but something like the 280, which is a pretty flat shooter, just like the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's not very popular though, so it might be a little bit more expensive. I don't know, but there's more 6.5 Creedmoor on the shelves than maybe you find it.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I had the impression that 6.5 was a little more on the pricey side, but if prices normal out, even after all this pandemic nonsense,
it certainly is, depending on what you're looking at, though. If you're looking at like 308 or 5.56, it's more expensive, hands down. But you're going to get what you pay for in terms of accuracy as far as the bullet goes. 6.5 Creedmoor, the reason it's so popular is because it's a very accurate round, it's a flat shooter, and it holds energy out to where it's going, which is why it was popularized, because originally it was a like competition shooting round.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more on the flat shooter part. But I'm curious, because I've heard even the military is even thinking about swapping to 6.5 at some point. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right, with that, I got to close out. I don't want to miss dinner.
Okay. Thanks again for showing up, Joe. Glad to have you on.
Bye, guys.
Later.
Okay, Dave, now it's just the two of us, now that Joe is left.
Two.
Yeah, so did you want to take a break from Modern and go into the Origins? Or did you
I didn't want to eat up Joe's time there, but I'm a trained historian, so you want to talk about firearms, and I'm like, oh, cool, let's start at the beginning, right? So
you're all in. Go for it.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Basically, firearms are called firearms because of the fire. The creation of gunpowder, arguably, or discovery rather of gunpowder, would be the the very, very brief origins, and that was one of the four great inventions in China during the 9th century AD. It was a byproduct of a medicine that the alchemists were coming up with. Shorthand term was fire medicine because of the fire and the flammable nature of gunpowder, right? The Chinese eventually ended up figuring out that they could put that on the end of a lance and have like an explosive kind of shock and awe effect at the beginning of battles. Imagine living in a time when, you know, you probably haven't left your immediate village and or country ever in your life, and here comes this foreign nation, or you're, you know, here and fighting this foreign nation in some way, shape, or form, and they come riding over the hills in their horses, which is what you expect, and you've got, you know, your bows drawn and your lances up, and then fire explodes from the end of their lances front line. You know, it's
It's a little frightening. Yeah.
right. You know, it could only be used once. They eventually figured out that they could kind of put shrapnel in it and have pipe bomb type devices at the end of these lances, which early on still had points on them. They still thought they were going to like use them to fight with. But then eventually they ended up losing the point when they, you know, figured out that they could load it in a more of a canister shape and get directed fire out of it, which is where we see the hand cannon evolve, and that would be 13th century onward. No, excuse me. 13th century onward out of China, and that is basically a tube on a stick that you had to physically light like this. So you'd be holding it, and the end would be coming out, and you'd be trying to aim it, and you have to come over here and light it. And, okay, and then you can try and load it all again. Obviously, they were not very accurate, but a large enough caliber could do some damage to, you know, structures and things, which made them effective tools of war. And they were good against armor, obviously, because, you know, no matter if your armor is going to be thin enough that you can move in it, it's going to be thin enough that a ball about that big could probably, or shot, you know, can penetrate at close enough range, or at least do enough damage internally. Then we get into some of my personal favorites: the matchlocks, the wheel locks, the flint locks, which all basically operate under the same structure, and that's from about the 15th century on to about halfway through the 19th century. The matchlock was a device that had you had to load it, and it had basically an ember stick that was, you know, embering on both sides, and so it would sit down and you know, that would light your flash pan and light your gunpowder and send your projectile out the barrel. But you had to like take that out because it was always on fire. So when you went to go reload the gun, you obviously couldn't have embers sitting there, anything lit anywhere near where you're trying to pack powder. And so it had to be like removed and set aside, or, you know, put in a pocket or something like that while you're reloading it.
More unloading procedure had to be done, kind of like a regular cannon on a ship. Same thing. You can't load another cannonball if there's still live stuff in there. You gotta clean it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So then you get to your wheel locks, which are basically Bic lighters. That mechanic of let's grind a wheel against some kind of flint to make spark was your ignition pattern. Everything else was essentially the same, but your ignition pattern was a huge deal of sparks, or not as huge, I guess, because of the wheel mechanism was obviously kind of clunky, because they were wheels and they looked more like standard gear wheels, where they had pretty wide teeth in them, and they hadn't figured out the way to machine, you know, really fine ridges yet, obviously.
Sure, that's the best they had for their tools, and some of them you had to wind, if I'm not mistaken. So when you click, it would unwind like a spring, and then that would make the spark.
Right, because you've got that, you know, like your wheel with the teeth on it, your gear that's essentially grinding up against the flint, making sparks. That was developed in Europe at the beginning of the 16th century and was used alongside the matchlock for a while till the flintlock came into being in the early 17th century. And that is kind of where we start seeing, well, I guess technically the wheel lock was the first self-igniting firearm because of the wheel mechanism, but it was so inefficient. The flintlock was really, that's where we start thinking about firearms like we know them. Here in America via the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and and actually the Civil War we got to the point where we were looking at they weren't flintlocks, they were cap locks or cap and ball, which is really the last thing before we get to center fire and fire standard cartridges. But I mean, super fascinating, from trying to make medicine and having this basically byproduct that nobody wanted that was just highly flammable to all these great weapons that we discussed over the last however long we've been talking, 20-30 minutes. So yeah, pretty incredible history of firearms. The historian in me loves the ways that we've gotten creative in trying to kill each other.
That's one way to put it.
I mean, it's really fascinating. It is. And because war changed with the advent of the A-bomb and unmanned drones, and the nature of warfare changed. Prior to that, there was a very personal nature to it. Even with the creation of firearms, it's like you had to get within a certain distance physically, and there was another guy within a certain distance looking back at you. That changed in the modern era, but especially back when we were talking about these matchlocks and flintlocks. I mean, you had to be within 100 yards to have a hope of prayer of hitting somebody. So talk about personal combat. And in the early days, it was just a preliminary. You get one or two shots off before you're in melee combat anyway. So it's really been the increase in efficiency of firearms has led to their superiority, which sounds like an obvious statement, but it's why we don't fight hand to hand anymore.
No kidding. I mean, and also with the flintlock, I mean, that's such a different tier than what people were on in the 1700s and other parts of the world. If You're seeing flintlock where you've got multiple lines of enemies that can shoot, at different paces, and that some are reloading, some are firing, some are moving forward. That's frightening because
a skilled marksman could fire 3 rounds in a minute. And so if you've got, one guy firing 3 rounds in a minute, he fires, kneels, the guy behind him fires. That process takes, we'll say 5 seconds, and then, and then you are, if you're only at 20 seconds in your reload, the guy behind them start to fire. You're halfway through your reload before your side to stop shooting at all, and you're going to be back in the game in 5-10 seconds here, ready to shoot again. So
it's pretty impressive, because if you're not in the firearms age by the point of flintlock, you're really behind the 8 ball. And people were looking at that going, we can't fight that. If we rush them, we're just going to get shot. I mean, the accuracy goes up as you try and charge. And then there's still cavalry. I mean, if you've got cavalry and then cannons, which is a totally, man, you start seeing cannons that actually work.
I would argue that's where the fork is in those hand cannons, is that, I went down the history of firearms, but there's a whole other fork that's kind of the history of cannonry, as they figure out how to make cannons more efficient, mobile, and this and that and the other.
And if you put them all 3 together, I mean, that's wicked. I mean, if you're still kind of in the tribal state, like if you're a tribe that's not really seeing a lot of outside contact, and you see cannons, you see mini cannons, essentially flintlock, and cavalry, I mean, you're done. I mean, you lose speed, you lose range. How are you supposed to fight that? If you run away, the cav's going to get you. If you charge, everything else is going to get you.
And then you're forgetting the critical fourth component, biological warfare. We are sitting here in North America, and that is the phenomenon you have described is the reason why we are sitting here today. Between the Spanish, the Russians, and the British, the Portuguese, and to an extent, I guess, the Dutch. But I mean, you're describing their earliest interactions with people on this continent. So
Yeah, and of course, disease. If you're not familiar with disease, they get it, and then people go, "Whoa, why is everyone getting sick?" But then all the English and everyone else is like, "I don't know what your problem is."
right.
Yeah, it's absolutely strange. You put those four things together, things really change fast.
Yeah.
But the good news is, I think because nowadays people are a little more accustomed to travel, in spite of what's going on now, but just in general in the modern world, we're just so used to stuff being flown over in 12 hours or on a boat, in a few days on a cargo ship that
Yeah.
we're
We've
kind of
been
getting used to each other.
globalized.
Yeah. We kind of got better at that.
Yeah.
But after Flintlock, so it's centerfire, rimfire.
Centerfire versus rimfire. So rimfire, basically the idea is firing pin would hit the bottom of your cartridge and the whole thing would crumple just a little bit from the pressure of it, which would be enough to crush the primer inside the actual rim at the bottom of the cartridge, and that would ignite your powder and send projectile out the barrel. A centerfire cartridge had that primer set in the middle, in the center of the cartridge, and instead of the whole rim collapsing, it's just the brass or copper or nickel or aluminum primer plate that ends up getting crushed, igniting just a little bit within the primer, but is enough to light your gunpowder to projectile out the barrel. So,
and then this is still all pre-smokeless. So this
is we use centerfire cartridges today.
with smokeless. But in our conversation at this point in the history of it,
yes, there was. We were talking about like grains of black powder. In at least one variant of all of these cartridges. And I couldn't list out what calibers exactly we were looking at, but that at this point we're at the point in history to where all of my 30-30 rounds are centerfire, but there are definitely 30-30s that shot rimfire. So
definitely, and the amount of cartridges that were around in that last 200-year period we mentioned between the 18th and 19th century alone, it's what you got, like 58 caliber for your muzzle loader. But then you've also got like a 40-40 or something for like the Spencer repeating action rifle. And
right.
It's just so random to me, because when I look at that kind of stuff, I go, why is it that way? And it goes back to what you said, it's machining. I mean,
right.
A lot
it's what you could machine.
Reliably.
Right.
Yeah.
Consistently. And consistently was the issue with projectiles, because just like you and Joe were talking about earlier with, the flattest, most accurate shot being essentially your goal, like your ultimate goal, when you're nowhere near that point and you're just kind of trying to get the squirreliness out of your shots, then it's consistency, It's like you settle for, well, it's a little squirrely, but it's consistently only a little squirrely.
And we can agree on that. And then I think the different calibers started to change, because it's like when you have a complex problem and you keep changing 5 variables, but one at a time. And then, this receiver's a little stronger. Okay, well, I need to add a little more black powder. Oh, wait a minute. Now I need to have my caliber a little less because I actually don't want it that big. And then they're playing that game.
Right.
And then
in the modern era, you get into shapes and chemical composition and things like armor-piercing rounds and full metal jackets and incendiary rounds, and I mean all the different flavors of these same calibers. Adds arguably another level to it.
Oh, totally. I mean, especially in World War I, when you start seeing, incendiary rounds in the air. What? I mean,
right.
that again, I thought we already had enough problems, and then all of a sudden, I'm literally seeing a real dragon show up. Like
See, we're back to shock and awe. Like I'm saying, they're lances on fire. Like it's the same. It's always been the same difference. Shock and awe. Shock and awe.
And that's when those blimps started going away because they're, we've got a lot of flammables in there. And then they eventually went to something that was inert, like helium. It's a good idea. Hydrogen's not a good idea for a gas like that. Also really light. You probably want something a little heavier like helium or argon or something. But, and then that is a totally different tier. I know with the modern, I've learned a little bit more about the modern. So once you start getting smokeless powder, you start seeing the cartridges, because that's what we're talking about right now instead of the guns. The cartridges start getting smaller. Like we talked about the 45 ACP, for the same amount of punch that you would need a 45 long Colt, which is a pretty long pistol round for your revolver. But then when you started seeing smokeless, which is nitrated cellulose, that stuff is 3 times the power. So then, okay, well, I guess I only need a third of the smokeless powder, so it shrinks to this. And then everyone's kind of, oh, wow, it's only this big? Yeah, it's only that big. So that means we can have more rounds. And then people started thinking, what if we could have a magazine? A maga what? And then... and then.
Well, plus, smokeless has the advantage in that it's smokeless. So you're more accurate if you're standing in the same spot shooting over a long period of time on a day where there's not very much wind. It's like it's more accurate because you can see where you're shooting after 100 rounds.
As opposed to like you shoot 10 rounds out of a lever action from 1890 and then you're just, like my gun's hot, I gotta reload, can't see. I mean, we're done here. I'm going to have to go to another position or something and reload. Whereas with it's not quite smokeless, but it's in comparison.
Compared to black freaking powder, my man. Smokeless.
Yeah. And I can see the reference when you have the right frame of mind there. And people notice, though, that also with smokeless that, wait a minute, we've always wanted to have a semi-automatic action, but we never knew how to do it. Now we've actually got a cartridge that can actually move the slide back. Maybe we could start trying out some prototypes now. And that's when you started seeing it. Because there isn't a firearm in the world that's smokeless that could be semi-auto because of the weight to power ratio. You'd never have enough powder for the type of cartridge you need to actually make the action slide back. Without having the gun blow up, of course, which is the other problem. Hey, I got the cycle. Well, you got to replace the frame now. Rats.
And, you're missing a finger. I got a cycle.
But now you can actually make it cycle safely. That's a big deal. And all of a sudden, the concept of a magazine, the concept of an actual moving slide, all that stuff started showing up. The toggle lock was the first one because no one really tried this before. What slide? I need like a big spring. That was the 1893 prototype pistol.
Springs add resistance. Yeah. I hear it. It's a yes.
But it takes a little work there to get that thing moving. Once they actually got it on a slide, that was I was blown away too. I'm going, okay, people really figured some stuff out with some prototypes. And again, the 1911, it took a long time to really get it. It took a lot of work with John Browning to actually put in multiple pistol designs. Hearing from the military saying, well, I don't want a sight safety, because that was what the first one had. It was in 38 ACP with a sight safety. You actually would push the sight down, and that would be your safety.
Huh.
That's crazy, though, because it's not ergonomic, right? If you're running around in Indonesia and you got one of those things, you're not going to remember that. So people would pull the trigger, and they're aiming at it. And so even the concept of safeties didn't really show up either. Because if you've got a 45-70, break action, who cares? It's one round. The safety is the round isn't in there.
It's safe.
It's safe. And like with your 30-30, it's the hammer isn't cocked back yet. It's safe.
Right.
You have to manually that is your safety. So people
Right.
didn't even really think about that either.
Well, my 3030 does actually have a safety built into the bottom of the stock, so that the lever has to be fully compressed against that little tiny button in order
Oh, okay.
for it to engage. It's super interesting. But I mean, the way that you hold it, your fingers are always in the lever, so when you're gripping the firearm to fire it, it's like you're gonna compress that. But it was an interesting find because, like I said, that was a family gun, but it wasn't my family. It belonged to a buddy of mine, and he, kind of going back to your debates on firearms during, let's see here, it would have been between Sandy Hook and I don't remember the
So
next one.
2012 to
Yeah,
2014, maybe.
um, yeah, it would have been maybe even a little later, 2016. He kind of he was a veteran, and so it's like he handled firearms, and that was his job for a while. He was a medic, uh, but he got to the point where he's like, I don't need anymore. He doesn't hunt, he didn't shoot for sport. He's like, I don't need these, but and he sold most of them, but that was his family gun, so he didn't want to sell it, and so he gave it to me and said, I'll give it to you on the condition that you never sell it. And I said, of course, man, and actually I bought it from him. But
Like a deposit.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it was a marginal amount of money for the firearm that it was, and I told him at any point you can pay me that same amount of money back, no interest, and I'll just give you the gun back. But he's never taken me up on that. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. I don't
Yeah,
know
you're
where
just
we're going
explaining
with
about your
this.
30-30 and yeah, the crazy safety and um,
Oh,
yeah.
right. So it wasn't my gun, and so so when he sold it to me, and we went out. I went out shooting without him, and kind of discovered that all at once when I took it out for the first time. I was like, why isn't this? And I compressed it, and it went. I was like, oh, that's interesting, and it's all built into the stock. So I mean, it's super interesting.
Yeah, kind of an experimental type because a lot of them didn't. Most lever actions back in the late 1800s, it really was just a hammer.
Right. Absolutely. And so I know that this one's a little because of that safety mechanism on it. But it's still one of my personal favorites. And I mean, I know it can't be particularly modern uh, because of the shortness of the wooden stock with no comfort built into it, and the fact that the the entire action mechanism and the loading mechanism is all the stock. Modern versions of that, they come up like this, and so they basically split in half down the middle, so you can open them up like a book to take them apart, clean them, diagnose issues. This one, it's got a solid stock, and it's all just kind of built in there. You just gotta.
Yeah, people didn't really think about maintenance as much. I mean,
Right,
probably because the way firearms were used and the frequency, people just assumed that you're probably going to deal with it when you actually have downtime. Field strip wasn't really a thing.
right.
Um,
And that goes back to your conversation about Glock and its advantage. Field
oh, the
strip on
field
a
strip.
Glock is ridiculous.
I mean, it takes 5 seconds and then click. Okay, here's your slide. Here's your barrel. Here's your recoil spring, and then here's your lower. And I'm just amazed by it because I go, that's like a toy,
Right.
and it's like, no, it's not a toy. It's just a really effective uh, way to take it apart. And I go, fair enough. And the funny thing is, you don't even need as much lubrication with that particular sidearm because it's just efficient.
Right.
I hate the sights on it though. I really do. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I hear it.
it,
I hear it.
but as far as efficiency, you could change that. I mean, with it, if someone handed me that to me tomorrow and said you can have this, I can go, gee, okay, is no criminal record? What is it like? You trying to screw with me? No, no, no. Just take it. I go, okay, maybe I could put a red dot, or I can change the the sights with, go to an armor or somebody. That's a small price to pay.
I hear it.
And there's plenty of aftermarket stuff nowadays, which is changing the game. Like,
oh yeah, and like like we were talking about at the intro, just the modularity of some guns is, I mean, just incredible, and how versatile you can make them, and how, because I mean, it's one of those things. If all you do is hunt, you can have a pretty simple pared down firearm with, just the means to hit what you want to hit at distance, not worry about anything else. But, there are your urban combat fanatics, people.
CQB.
Yeah, the CQB crowd, we'll call them, right? That are, stoked about every element of the 13,000 types of sights and angle grips, and what I mean? Yeah, folding stocks, and you name it. And it's like, all that, for me, that's stuff that's going to break. But, it's like, for them, they like the versatility of it. And that's supposed to be the point, right? The comfort of it, this and that.
Yeah, and some stuff, I mean, you got to really put your money where your mouth is when it comes to modularity, because if you want stuff that doesn't break, I mean, for example, you can buy like a $50 plastic foregrip if you wanted to mount to your Picatinny rail, but don't come crying to me when you run it against the wall and you go, hey, where'd the other half of my foregrip go? Buy a metal one, So there are some ways you can prevent that and go, okay, cool, just buy the extra cost, or just eat the extra cost for your modularity if you really care about that stuff. And foregrips being one of them, your sights being another. So if you need an EOTech or an aim point that's like a $400, $500 hollow sight, spend the money instead of getting a $50. Again, where'd my sight go? Well, the battery's not lasting more than an hour, and it's like a toy. Right. And it's kind of hard to know that, because these things really haven't been here very long.
We're definitely in technology is moving quickly.
And I've heard this from people coming back from their tours of, hey, back in 2008, people who had ACOG sights, some people had them. Not a lot of people, but some people did. And then all of a sudden, 2014, you're seeing massive amount of people show up with them. You don't have one? Oh, that's part of the kit. Oh, aren't they like $1,200? Yeah, they're part of the kit. Believe you're in Afghanistan. You're going to need this. Right. And that's been cool, because now that gives people, again, the extension of their rifle is now turned into something way cooler than what it was before with iron sights. And iron sights are cool, but man, when you got to push your luck, there's nothing like an ACOG that can help you out.
Well, yeah, and there's something to be said about being able to put your sight where you want to put your shot, and being able to see below that point. Because with old school iron sights, by nature, there was some element that supported the iron sight that you could not see through, that was made out of iron. And so there's something to be said for a style of sight which allows you to essentially see the end of your barrel, some space, some space, and then where you're going to put your shot. It helps. You can just see more. Your field of vision is wider.
And that's a good thing. I mean, and they've even got the iron sights now where you can fold them down. So if you want to put like an EOTech or something like that on,
right
now it's not even in the way. And
right.
I like those. Now, granted, some of them can break because it's on a hinge, but if you put them down and you punch it against something, at least it's flat, so it's able to maintain that stress. And we got on sights, I guess, because we went from the firearms caliber category to eventually you just got a wide range of calibers and most of them they just work. It's hard to tell how many calibers don't work in the smokeless era. What I mean by don't work is that aren't used, that aren't effective. They've been around because somebody somewhere used them, and enough people are still buying them and consider them useful, modular.
Right. Right. Because I think it's that efficiency touched on a few times now is that, what I described, the efficiency difference between lighting lighting a can of shot on fire at the end of a stick while you're riding a horse to getting that same shot to come out of a tube, and the spread pattern on that it's wildly more efficient. I mean, we're talking, those initial fire lances were 3 feet, 10 feet max range, and then you get to these hand cannons that are closer to, I don't know, 25, 50 feet of range. And so, it's like that's huge. But, and then same thing, we're coming up to self-igniting. Once we get to the point where I'm not igniting this, it's like that's huge because we can get up to our flintlocks 3 shots a minute. And like that's a huge jump. But once we're in the modern era and we're talking about, well, this has slightly more drop, and this is a smaller caliber, so I can get 12 shots in the same space that you can only fit 10 shots. It's like, yeah, it's more efficient, less efficient, but by a slimmer margin than the huge advances that we've seen in the past. And so it's like, you're always going to have people like me with my 30-30, like Joe with his 30-06. Like they could release the Incredi gun that shoots all the way around the curvature of the earth and will hit you in the back of the head, however long it takes that bullet to travel. But I'd still keep my 30-30. I'd still buy ammo for it. He'd still keep his 30-06. He'd still buy ammo for it. They're just our preferences.
And that really is it. You nailed it. It's preference. And I certainly have my preferences, and I want to stand by them. And I bet everyone else does too. So
right.
We've seen this happen with all these calibers where it's just everyone likes what they like. Now, granted, there's the popular type of, 9 and 45. Those two are still radically popular. So I figured if I had to be shooting something, get something in those calibers because it's going to be easier for logistics and pricing. And
right.
That's a lot of it. Now it's more market driven than it is about combat effective driven.
And 9mm you can find most any place. In 45, same deal. You can find most any. The only other round that I would argue that's for a handgun that's easy to find would be 380.
380 ACP.
They're just everywhere, and so I'd argue those 3 calibers are probably more easiest to find zombie apocalypse scenario. You want to have a gun that will shoot one of those 3.
And then also, and if you're in America, 40 Smith & Wessons that like right there too.
I guess that's true. I guess that is true.
But here's the thing about 40. Everyone likes to claim that 40 is awesome. It is snappier. You get another 200, 300 feet per second. It is snappier. So you got to deal with that as far as a handgun for semi-autos. For semi-autos, as far as smooth shooting and decent recoil, it's 9, 380, and 45.
And if we're talking modern era with the point of concealed carry, I know people who their personal concealed carry is preferred caliber is 380 because of because again it comes down to preference. What can fit in my hand and what firearm feels comfortable in my hand, but then what can also be small enough to fit in the fanny pack, small of a back, on an ankle holster, on it is that you want to hold it. But they like their 380 because they're easy to carry, and if they ever found themselves in a position where they needed to use it, the job done.
And then that's it. And they're well known for being compact. And right. I don't want a compact 40 because it's already snappy as a full size.
Right. How are you even going to hold that thing?
Yeah. And I mean, great, you scared them off, but you almost shot, your neighbor over there. I mean, I don't see it unless you're really skilled, and which that's exactly what 40 people say is you really have to practice, and then it's fine.
Right, and that circles back to, and this is, I guess, the major stay on the politics of firearms for very long. But I just want to emphasize my personal philosophy that firearms are at their core, they are tools. And so it comes down to people appreciate the craftsmanship of them and the way they fit in their hand and all of the same, their effectiveness, their efficiency. The same thing that people appreciate about other tools of other categories. The same thing that I like about all my handyman tools and when I'm working out on the car. It's like I bought my tool to fit good in my hand and to work like it's supposed to and save me as many wrench turns as possible. And you know what I mean? It's like that's why I have a deep socket set over just a regular crescent wrench, is because I want to be able to just, slide it in there and ratchet that thing out here where I've got space, rather than trying to figure out how I'm going to get this wrench in there to turn it 1/8 of an inch and then pull it back out and try and get back around, turn it another 1/8 of an inch. And, it's just
We've all been there.
It's the same. It's the exact same thing. The only difference is that this tool is designed to do damage to something over there, and a lot of times that damage results in death, and unfortunately a lot of times that damage is dealt to a human. And so but that, I'm of the camp that says more about societies and that says more about people than it says about firearms. Technology is not inherently good or bad, it's the way in which it's utilized. And the utilization of firearms up until prior to the last 100 years has been almost exclusively, warfare on a large scale, home defense, hunting, or I guess the occasional duel, depending on when in history you're talking about. And it's really just been in the last 100 years that we started killing each other and killing bands of civil. Well, I guess it's not true if we talk about, like we were talking about the Spanish and the Portuguese and all that. So we've been doing it for a while, but since we've been so globalized, since we've been, since that world has gotten so much smaller, and we've been, I guess this might not be a great time to say this, but we're not going to necessarily get wiped out by a disease from somebody from another country just because we've never been exposed to it. It's like we have so many people going back and forth the continent that we've all either died off or developed natural immunities to things like the common cold, and it takes something crazy like COVID-19 to throw us to make us all dive into our holes. But even that, it's has a variety of severity. Some people are impacted than others, and it's not everybody will be more impacted. Everybody's in that category like it was. And so with firearms, I think it's really just that we haven't gotten to the point yet to where we're willing to say, like Joe and I, if there's one frame that is the biggest damage dealer, and we as a society can all agree that this thing, whatever it is, needs to go to make everybody safer, then maybe, right? But as of now, we're in a world we've decided, or at least a country where we've decided that, okay, we have the Second Amendment, we all have the right to bear arms, but not these arms and not with that modulation, only with this many bullets in your clip, and only if you have and we live in California, we've got things like the bullet button and, different frames that aren't allowed, and pins which need to be removed to make weapons function the same way they'd function in other states. I understand the desire to do something, human nature to want to act and to want to say, okay, look at what we've done now. We've said that this is not allowed. We've said that that's not okay. We've outlawed this particular type of modulation. Until you assess the deeper issues of why somebody shoot up a school or a movie theater, kill their fellow man outside of a common life-threatening situation, then your legislation isn't going to. It'll make access more difficult. It's not going to as long as we've decided that it's okay for the rest of us to bear an assault.
We have something in the pharmaceutical world called corrective action, preventive action. So this happens after a deviation with something. So, I'm in the medicine industry,
Of course.
and we make things that are going to be made for downstream and for human consumption. So people are going to take this, whether it be some kind of treatment or a cure for a disease, or fighting superbugs or whatever. Just something to do with making sure the human body is able to survive some kind of biological disease or something that's autoimmune, whatever. We have to do actual preventative actions when things go wrong in processing, And if it's not effective, we actually have somebody like the client or our own QA department that says that's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at what they do, and they kind of play footsie with it. And I agree with you that your typical human being that's shooting up schools or shooting up a movie theater, that says quite a bit about what's going on with some of the mental health in this country, which is a different rabbit hole, of course. But
well, mental health, veterans, how we take care of the homeless, so much overlap in those three things. We could do all 3, 10, 12 hours on.
But what I'm getting at, though, is having a corrective action that actually makes sense. And for me, if you just keep looking at one weapon, the AR-15, I'm sorry. That, to me, is... that's playing footsie with the corrective action, preventive action. That's like saying, we'll train our public that it's not good to shoot people, and we'll put it on the news, and we'll ban one part of it, and everyone will get scared, and everyone will buy at the stores because they're afraid that you can't buy an AR-15 or its parts anymore, which is what it does, by the way. It actually encourages more firearm sales than anything. Democrats forget this, and I laugh because every time there's something that goes wrong, more of this stuff gets bought, not less.
Right.
And if
we're out of ammo right now at Country Pleasures. At our local gun store, there is no ammo. None. Zero ammo on the shelf because of a non-military issue. It's a virus. And it's enough to buy up all of the ammo. Like, this wasn't a shooting, because the same thing happens. I've talked with gun store owners in the wake of school shootings and say, hey, how's business? And they've said, business is booming, and they always look kind of guilty. They don't want to be relishing the fact that their business booms after a publicized shooting, but the fact of the matter is their business is a publicized shooting.
And that's something that people forget, that, hey, why is it that people are so scared? And I think it's because they are afraid of government corrective action. And if you look at how much is already in circulation, you think the gov would be like, all right, fine. Look, we don't want people panic buying. We're going to tell you right now, nothing's going to get passed through. Just, for God's sake, stop trying to buy everything. But the funny thing is, even when they say that, everyone goes, I can't believe them. They've got a bad track record. I'm going to the gun store. And and they're screwed either way. So it's a hard one for them, because their credibility, I think a lot of it's been shattered, particularly in California.
Oh, yeah.
Which is too bad, because, it didn't always used to be that way. But as far
California was the birthplace of the Black Panthers, which was the origins of gun control laws federally, was to take power away from... there was a practice within the Black Panther movement in Oakland where they would have patrols, because at that point in time it was legal for you to carry a shotgun and have it chambered, or to carry ammo with it. I don't remember the specifics, but essentially when the police would pull over a black person and would be harassing them, and this patrol of usually 2 to 4 black men would see it, they'd get out of their vehicle, grab their shotgun, and stand across the street watching the ordeal go down, with kind of the the spirit of it being, you know, if you are going to threaten us with violence, we will. Violence was the type of mentality it was, but it, you know, and it was in that moment that we had that gun control laws started in effect, was to remove power from Black community specifically. And it's like when you have the origins of something like that, every time you pass something new, you just fails. And the fact that we have the Second Amendment and a culture that's so well baked into our society, it's like you're never gonna, like you're saying, the plane, never gonna remove firearm culture from America. You're never gonna, even if you're the biggest drive and offered the most money for gun collection, you'll never get Americans to turn in all their guns. And you know, it's like, so what? I understand you got to manage risk. How much? How effective is it?
See, they never say that.
You're setting you up for failure. Failure. You know, it's like you're trying to regulate something that's gonna. It's the reason why we don't have, why all drugs are outlawed except for tobacco and alcohol, and I guess marijuana. It's because you can charge taxes on those things, and it's easier just to say, pay the government extra money to have these things. We're not going to try and regulate them. You know, it's like,
it's too much trouble. Yeah,
but it's too much trouble. It's like, pay extra taxes on it, and as long as we get our cut, we're fine. And that's always been the government shtick. It's like, if we get our cut, we're fine. You can have it.
Yeah, and do it responsibly. I mean,
right.
No one's saying that on the firearm pro side, we want to do irresponsible things with firearms. It's just stop messing with our equipment.
Look, they wrote it in the Constitution, bro. Yeah. Like, what else should I have to cite? Like, what evidence do you need?
It's in the core of our laws.
I guess not in the Constitution. It's in the Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
But, you know, it's like, but it's still, you know, it's like it's right there. Like, what are we?
It's right there.
What are we arguing here?
And
the only amendment ever to be removed was the
it's on alcohol.
Well, I guess it was on alcohol. And the amendment.
Yeah, they just made another one because you can't really just take it away. You have to. Well, the 21st Amendment was really to stop the 18th, but and it was kind of good because, I mean, man, the last thing you'd want is more Al Capones. Can you imagine Al Capones in like 2020? You know, on like your whiskey or something. Forget about it.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, but you know, I guess to go up on tangent, especially because I started this with a glass of whiskey and now I don't have a glass of whiskey. But you know, it's firearms are tools, and it really is in my eyes more of a matter. It's individual responsibility and over their own firearms, and our responsibility as a community to, you know, to take better care of one another. To you know, it's not really fair to say we need to catch all people who have violent tendencies and psychosis and institutionalize them. But, you know, maybe we prevent them from buying firearms. Maybe, you know, maybe it's their family members' responsibility to make sure that they remove access to their firearms from that individual. Because a lot of this is like kids having access to their parents' firearms. And I mean, occasionally it's an 18-year-old buying something themselves, but it's like it's not gonna change. It's not gonna change anything. Like we need more drastic, systematic change, and it's an either-or situation. Like the Second Amendment, or you can start regulating all of this stuff. But while you have both, it's not. You're always going to have people that point to it, saying, "I have the Second Amendment on my side," and you'll always have people on the other side saying, "Yeah, children." It's like, well, yeah, it's tragedy, but until something changes with, you know, the laws that are the doctrine of this nation, you're never going to see a change. And even then, the culture is so baked in, you probably wouldn't see any change. So.
And
that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because why else would they be doing something like this? And for me, it's, I know they want control, I know they want to stop violence and they want to stop that, but it's you said it best. We need to take care of our own. And the best way I think that's really what makes people stop shooting up movie theaters and schools. When they see that it's people they value, they probably won't shoot because they see themselves actively targeting what they stand for. And they can't do that. Most people, I would say 99% of people, do not have the guts to shoot something they actually value. They'll probably put it down.
Yeah, and I think that there's a bigger issue with psychosis at large, and our ability to identify it, and that ties into the healthcare. Because if you can't afford healthcare, how are you going to have your psychosis? But there's again, we could do the sub branches of. Bottom line is, it's the old joke is, guns never killed anyone. And somebody points to a gun on the shelf and says, I've been watching, since I bought it 30 years ago, never killed anyone. And it's like, of course guns don't kill people, people kill people. Like, of course that's the truth. But the fact of the matter is, like, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And it's a lot easier to regulate. So.
Yep. And with that said, we really just, instead of playing footsie with the corrective action, preventive action, it just makes sense to make people strong enough up here with their arms, with their body, with their communities. That really is the way out. It's not trying to mess with one particular firearm. Oh, cool, we fixed one particular firearm. It's whack-a-mole. You know how many firearms there are out there with different models and brands? I mean, forget about it. Even the Democrats can't even name them all. Republicans can't even name them all.
Right.
So you might as well find ways to actually get in there. But that's harder. People like easy solutions.
And that's what I'm saying is that people want to be able to point to something and say, well, look what we did. Look what we passed. Look what we've regulated in the wake of tragedy to try and... It's human nature to try and make sense of things and try and place meaning on traumatic events. I mean, it's just, it's human nature. And it's like, I will never fault somebody for having that impulse to I want to do something. Maybe this will make things safer. The argument of, well, if it stops one person from buying it that wants to do damage with it and saves one life, that it's worth having. And it's like, to an extent, yes, that's true. But if you take that to its extreme, it's like, I want to know how many common household objects crime and passion have taken place with. And it's like, are you going to outlaw every steak knife, vase,
pencil,
wine bottle, pencil, anything that can be used as a weapon because it might save one life down the line? It's like, I don't know. But I'm not a politician. It's not my job to do all that. I can sit here and talk with you and shoot the crap here and be totally wrong about stuff and right on the nose about other things. Have that be totally okay.
Here, I can make you feel better about your choice. So, before I got into oil, I had a guy that was trying to recruit me for Naver. Okay? So, I don't know if you know this about my story. So Naver, they're like the branch between the Marines and the Navy. They help make them essentially a lot of good stuff. Okay, I'll keep the NDA pretty vague on that one, but they help the Marines and the Navy. And whatever they need, we need some new toy. Here it is, and then wow, thank you, you saved like this whole platoon today because they didn't have to do it. We just had to call in this particular tool and it worked.
Right.
He said in his opening intro, so define a weapon. And people were like, well, it has to be something you have to actively do. Okay, so is a pencil a weapon? And then people were kind of looking at him kind of weird. And he goes, yeah, it is. So we could draw this line as far back as you want. But just keep in mind, anything can be used as a weapon depending on the motivation and how it's used. And this is coming straight up from somebody who works with the U.S. In this matter. So that's something that, when I heard that, I'm going, wow. He's saying this, by the way, to a bunch of college students, which I thought was interesting. Because a lot of college students don't really think in this way. So he had the guts to say that, and I'm glad he did.
Yeah, sounds like he reached you just like he was trying.
I guess he reached me for 3 years, and then on that 4th year, my life changed a little bit, and I found adventure in an actual job, because this was an actual offer. Nave was going to take longer, and man, if you've ever had an offer 6 months before you actually need it, that's nice.
Yeah, I bet.
But getting back to firearms in general, did you have any favorites? Now that we've talked about this whole history, did you have any favorites besides the 30-30?
No, I mean, no. My 30-30 is my favorite, but I've always wanted some of these historical weapons we're talking about, specifically used in a conflict, if at all possible. It's like that. That's something that I've always been drawn to, and I've always wanted. And even if it was just, a non-operable wall hanger, but it was a true antique, which was in, a particular war, a particular battle, a soldier held, their life depended on that. That's the kind of thing that I've been looking for. And I actually did a bit of research to try and get you some background on 50 Navy, which is probably it was the last that cap and ball action, so the very last style of action before we switched over to center fire and that kind of thing. So it still had that like old school, moving parts and and striking needs to happen and fire needs to be created. Needs to travel down a tube to light some powder to fire the 36 caliber ball. That's something that appeals to me, and that's but it's so iconic that it's incredibly expensive to get that operates or doesn't operate, and even revisions.
So this is the 1851 Navy revolver. And
correct.
This is where you've got to load each individual round with the. You got to put the powder first, cartridge in there, ball on the outsides, and then you got to cock the hammer back each time because it's not double action. It's single action.
Single action. Correct.
Yeah, and believe me, I like it too. But really, in the game of Red Dead. Because they don't really treat it like a ball and cap, or they treat it like they drilled a hole through it. So it's like a modified 1851 Navy. What they did was they just drilled the bore through it, and then they kept the loader so you can put the cartridges in like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting because you'd think the easier solution would be just to spin the wheel and put it in, but the animation is you see him actually pumping in each cartridge. I thought was interesting. I guess you could do it that way. It's just depending on if it's rimless or not.
Right.
Yeah, the 1851. How about so that's for a pistol. Do you have any like semi-auto rifles that you like or?
No, I mean, like you're saying, caliber comes down to like modern firearms. It just comes down to caliber.
Yeah.
And you get something modular enough that the comfort factor can be mitigated with just buying something that's modular. And I'm a historian. I want old guns. I want antiques. The M1911 is probably the closest thing to a modern firearm that I have an interest in having, and that's because it was an iconic World War II firearm. So,
I'd highly recommend it. They're a favorite of mine. As far as historical, though, I would like to match you with something. So they made M1 Garands in 308 for the Navy. And that would be my antique firearm that I'd want to have.
An M1 Garand would be excellent.
but they made it in 308 because the Navy was like, well, we don't have the money to have M14s yet in the 50s. That's all going to the Army. So fine, keep us with the Garands for a while, but make it calibrated for 308. And
Interesting.
now, and they run for about the same amount of money as a modern M1A. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go a little higher since they're scarce. But they use guess what? They use the same, the M block clips. So because you have to load it into the magazine, that's all they got is clips. They use the same ones as the 30-06, which I thought was really interesting. So you could still just take the same millions of cheapo, ping ping pings, cheap stamp metal, and put in 308 rounds and put that in there. And I thought that was kind of cool because I go, oh, so I can use the same 308 that I'd like to shoot with other semi-autos with that. And that would be mine if I had to choose. And then I'd have, that would be my fifth addition to my selection. But I don't know if I'll get it anytime soon. That'd be something probably later in life, but that's on my list.
Yeah, that's what lists are for.
Yeah, maybe I'll debaucher it and take the wood stock off and put a synthetic one on. That would be hilarious. Hey, look, it's more modular. What did you do to this M1 Garand? It's supposed to have a walnut stock, man. What's wrong with you? Sorry, I want it to be like a pound less. Here you go. Oh, how could you ever do such a thing? You put a Picatinny rail on it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know.
Why didn't you just get a regular M1A? I know. Well, I wanted it to be a Garand, and anyway, yeah, that'd be Frankenstein. I wouldn't do that to it. If I had to replace the stock, it would be just another walnut stock, and I wouldn't put a rail on it. I
appreciate. It'd be your property, so you can do what you want with it.
But the fact that they don't make any more of it makes people cringe, right?
Right.
Because they look at that and they say that's wrong. Why do you have a rail on something from the 1950s?
Right. It's like your car show guys. It's like they're more interested in anything that's got stock parts, anything that's fully stock. Like that's what you.
Yeah, not aftermarket. Like an ACOG on an M1 Garand, you're like, wait. That's kind of useful, but it just doesn't look right.
Right.
Yeah, 308, as you can tell, 308, that is a special place in my heart. It seems to just do the trick. It's still chucking along in the military right now. There's talk. Now, there's talk. We didn't talk about the future, David. We talked about modern stuff. We didn't talk about the future. You know what people want to do? They're talking about, and I'm not really much of a SIG guy. I don't know if you are. Do you like SIG? 6 hour?
Take it or leave it.
See, that's kind of how I feel until I saw their P320. But that's not really what sold me. I might get one later in life too because it's striker fire and actually has a manual safety, unlike Glock, which Glock, it's only you pull the trigger, and that kind of freaks me out. So I kind of want the manual. When I saw that, I go, oh, that's a striker fire pistol I can get used to. Anyway, their SIG is trying to come out with a 338 Norma Magnum round, which is between a 7.62 x 51 and a 50 caliber, and they want to make a light machine gun with it, or a medium machine gun. So the idea is you could chamber it in 338 Norma Magnum, 7.62 x 51, or 300 Win Mag, all three of them, and pretty easily.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you could chamber it each way. You just got to change the barrel out, and maybe a couple other parts. And it's got like the short recoil barrel, like the Barrett 50 cal.
Right.
And they want it because in the event of another war, they want to be ready for better body armor. And I've seen body armor. I could post that in the link too. I've seen body armor fired into by a 50 cal incendiary round. Didn't penetrate.
Wow.
We're talking about vest armor.
Yeah, that's great. The individual would be knocked on their ass.
Oh, the individual would probably be incapacitated.
Yeah.
Yeah. But nonetheless, alive.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, if body armor is really getting better, we're going to need a medium machine gun that, okay, maybe they can take 1 or 2 rounds. How about 5? Dot, 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 and then they're down, like, no, without question, because the armor, I mean, it's good, but it's not that good.
Of course.
It's got limited supply. I mean, yeah, they could try and change it out real quick, but then again, the armor is not always encompassing the whole body. So there's new ceramics coming out, and I think people are noticing that the writing's on the wall that maybe we should start thinking about getting some more armor-piercing stuff. The Lapua Magnum is where it's based off. It's a Finnish round back in like the early 20th century, but it's armor piercing up to 600 meters.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Now keep in mind, that's not a 50. 50s can do it, but they're heavy. 338, kind of shorter. So imagine you've got a round that can do that much damage, but you can carry more of it. So from the military's logistics standpoint, they think, aha, that would be good. 50s cal's really heavy. So they're trying to find a new medium ground between 7.62 and the 50. But I think the Ma Deuce will always have its place. I mean, as long as we're in the smokeless era.
Right, of course.
I think...
Pending the next great invention. Right.
Pending the next great invention, I think the Ma Deuce really... Don't you love it? They designed it for anti-tank because it's World War I and they haven't really figured out plate armor yet. And then it turns out to be just the best anti-material light vehicle weapon that we still use to this day for that very reason. And there's something to be said for that. So that's something that's new that's coming out.
Cool.
You already know about the SIG P320, which is the new U.S. sidearm that's striker fire. And I think that's kind of cool. The way it works, I still would prefer the 1911, but as far as round count, I mean, it does pretty well, and I think it functions as advertised, that's good. It had some problems, as most guns do on a mass scale. The quality control goes down because the production goes up. And then there's this, well, my slide fell off, and it's not drop safe. And you see these selected cases where people really freak out and it blows up over the internet. They're really cracking down on that, which they did the same with the Beretta. They did the same thing in the 1980s when they're going, oh, my slide frame broke and all this stuff. Well, okay, we'll fix it. Most of them aren't broken. It's just a select lot. And then they overcome it. And for me, the Beretta's really cool too. So that's my goal. I eventually want to have all 3 of the semi-autos. And I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I eventually want to have all 3 of them in my inventory at some point.
Nice. Well, that's what I said earlier. That's what a list is.
Yeah.
Put them on the list and prioritize them however you want. As you get the extra cash, and it's like, all right, I can get one, and buy the one at the top of the list, and keep working your way through it.
Yeah, especially now that the way semi-auto ammo's worked in the last even couple decades, they've really cleaned up the quality control. And granted, there's still things like Blazer or like the cheapo stuff, but you really can get some really good quality control on ammo nowadays that we've never done before. So there's something to be said for that. I had a question for you about YouTube channels. Do you watch any YouTube on guns or anything like that?
I don't. I've heard you mention one.
Yeah, so Vickers Tactical, that's one of them. He's an ex-Delta Force guy. And I really like that because he has some practical experience with CQB and doing missions, and he'll tell you about the stupid stuff that people have done and how it doesn't work. And it's fun because then you just learn from it as a new guy instead of having to do it yourself. And so you learn half the lessons.
Always better to learn from other people's mistakes.
Now, ain't that the truth? There's another guy, he's old. I showed this to Anthony, Hitchcock 45. He is essentially like the Tennessee gun nut of America. But he's really kind. He's like 6'6", and here's like my 5 1911s, and then, here's my 2 M1As, and here's my AK-47 that I got from Bud's Gun Shop, and here's my other gun that I got from Bud's Gun Shop. Here's my 375 H&T. Like, he'll just keep bringing them out, and you're like, does he have like a warehouse? Does he?
Where'd they all come
from? And it's because he's sponsored by Buds, and other ammo companies essentially give him ammo to shoot. So as an old retired teacher, get this, old retired teacher gets to do this for his retirement hobby, and it pays for itself. And he films with his son John, and his son's like 30, so kind of close to our age. And he's just been doing amazing work. And you can find him, Hitchcock 45. He's got like 4.5 million subscribers. And he does stuff on gun safety. And he shoots steel safely. And shows you how to reload fast. And all that good stuff. So those two right there are awesome. TFB TV's got a few things that are really good. Because it kind of tells you what to buy if you're new to the firearms industry. And kind of like how to prepare for stuff. And then Sensible Prepper is the last one. That guy's cool because it's not just guns, it's just about supply chain. How to get ready for stuff.
Right.
And so those are my 4.
Cool. I'll check them out.
Yeah, and I can put those in the description too. I'll keep calling this out so when I'm listening to this later, I'll be like, oh, right, I forgot. Let me type it in. So I had a last random question. If you've got, how are you doing on stamina, by the way? I had one more question.
Dinner's coming along. You probably got one more question.
Okay, I've only got one more. So, if you had to pick one ammo to reduce by like 25% for like the rest of your life, what would it be?
It'd probably be one of those handgun calibers we talked about earlier, either 45 9mm or 380. And it honestly, it depends on which 3 of them. Like, whichever one I end up carrying, that's the one I'd like to go down. But it's going to be a matter of finding a frame that I can conceal well enough. But I have wide palms and long fingers, so guns are weird. Guns are weird for me. It's like my monkey fingers come too far around some guns, but they can't be too big because conceal. So I probably won't end up with 45. I'd probably say 9mm or 380. Either of them would be just as happy.
See, and I appreciate that sentiment, but as someone who fires long guns from time to time, I personally would like it in either. I actually would like it with the 3. If the 308 went down by 25%, I would kind of be like, yes, because especially, and hear me out. So especially if the Army goes to this 338 round and that becomes surplus.
Right.
And then they keep making it. So you got surplus, you got people making it. Man, I would be like, yes. And 6.5 Creedmoor, yeah, that's expensive. But 308 does the job just fine. It's like the son of the 30-06.
Yeah.
And so it's 6.5. It's a flat shooter, but I still find it a little too exclusive. 308 though, I feel like I'm in the party because that's what the U.S. uses, and it's effective. It's been designed for a specific role, and it doesn't mess up.
Right. And you've got a lot of field testing the Army.
Just saying.
Yeah, I hear it.
They really like it. I mean, they were talking about when 5.56 wasn't doing that so hot in the first beginnings of the Iraq War, they're breaking out the old M14s because they said, screw it. Guys, get in the armory, get some stuff, we're going to take these guys down. And then when they've upgraded the 5.56 ammo to something that was actually lethal, they said, okay, we can put these back, fine. And then some people were like, I'm keeping mine. I don't know about you.
I'm keeping mine up.
Because when they went to Afghanistan, they're going, I'm shooting 800 meters out. No, I'm going to keep the enhanced battle rifle if that's okay with you. And people still do. And that's, again, this is 1950s technology. People still don't want to give it up.
Right.
And same with the Russians, by the way. 7.62 by 54R. Holy crap, that's 1890. People still like that round. But
for a long time, Russia was the number weapons producer in the country or in the world. So there's something to be said about gun culture in Russia too.
I couldn't agree more. So, was there anything else you wanted to bring up? I ran out of questions, so I'm
I got my political spiel. Take care of people. That's basically my spiel.
well. Good. Well, here let me end the stream here, and then we could discuss offline a couple other things. Everyone else, thanks again for watching. We had a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun. Do the liking, do the subscribing.
Yeah, leave a comment if you want to. Peace out, everybody.
Later.